Welcome to the next episode of Take a Break.
Take a break. Keep the whole world guessing. Take a break from the human race. Take a break when it gets depressing. Take a break.
Pat Armistead is a voice for all that is joyful. In this series, she brings a fresh approach to emerging consciousness. Through conversational, social and emotional intelligence, she and her guests explore new models of leadership that embrace humour, empathy and compassion.
My guest today is Lez Moore. Lez is a leader who's willing to see beyond the facade, someone who's willing to go the extra mile and see what others aren't necessarily seeing in the people he works with and the people others work with. He works in healthcare in New South Wales. Thanks so much for joining me today. One of the things in our last conversation we were talking about was, as a leader, being able to work more intuitively is a gift and skill that can bring a lot to a leadership role these days. Do you want to expand on that? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, intuition and gut. It's a really good question, Pat. And one of the things that I think is not utilised enough. Generally, if you're in a leadership role and you're being given a position of leadership or management and you have the management of people and the direction of the company or the organisation or what it is, generally you come into that role pretty much with everything you need. Everything you need to make good decisions, everything you need to make sure everything's on track. But quite often, and when I say the word but, nothing usually is a good after the word but, as we know, people are reluctant to use their gut and that intuition that they have around making decisions as a leader or a manager. And it's I guess not an indictment on the way our culture as managers and leaders, and there's probably a little bit of fear around doing that. You know, as we step up into those leadership roles, whether we've stepped up in an orderly fashion, a lot of times people are promoted on seniority as well, which makes it very difficult then to, okay, now I'm leading the team, how do I do it? And if they just, again, trusted their instincts and their tuition, if they've been doing a role for a long time and they've been part of that for a long time, they've got a lot to offer and a lot to give. So I think people just need to trust their instincts and trust the gut, because you've got so much in your brain, whether it's in your gut, in your mind, that you've already established over 10,000 hours. Probably when you look at the 10,000 hour principle, quite often it's of a subconscious nature, and generally when you're making decisions, you are bouncing ideas within your head that you don't even realise. But intuition and gut, I'd have to say, like Don Bradman's batting average, it'd be 99.94% of the time you'd be on the money, for sure.
Yes. For a long time, we've been saying, oh, I just had that feeling in my gut. But there's a lot of science now that substantiates this thinking. There's enough science there that tells us, well, we know we've got a head brain, but we've also got enough neural networks in our heart and our gut for them both to be called a brain as well. And a relatively new process called embraining looks at how we can work with people to bring the head, the heart and the gut together so that they're supporting each other rather than opposing, because very often we're just up here in the head, and we need that strategic thinking, but we also, especially now, need to be bringing more heart, and we need to be, we don't just have intuition in the gut, it's where we source courage. So that too is needed, stepping forward to adopt a level of personal expression that hasn't been so prominent perhaps in the past, and, you know, bringing more of yourself into your role, and in doing that, opening up this really high trust environment. where people feel safe. I just think that's one of the key things moving forward, because there's just so much doubt and uncertainty out there, and people are going to need a higher level of reassurance about not just physical safety, but psychological safety.
Yeah, definitely. Look, as we've all experienced, and we're still experiencing it now, the COVID-19, the pandemic, that whole scenario where we went from going to sleep one day, waking up the next, with only one problem on our mind, and that was what's going on with this pandemic, and everything else we had that was an issue was pretty much put aside for that moment in time. And as we progress, things are obviously going to be different. Things are going to be, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, all those things, which we already deal with pre-COVID anyway. It's going to be, that's going to be up to another level. So as a leader, I think the compassionate side of a leader really needs to shine through, because they need to make it more about the people that they're looking after now, because they're the ones that are feeling it.
Yes.
And
yes.
As a great leader, it's your job even to make sure that your team is well, is healthy, psychologically, physically, all those things. And I think that's really important, which I think over the last however many decades, a lot of managers or a lot of leaders have sort of taken that stuff for granted. They've been so focused on the outcomes that they forget about how they get those outcomes. And you get outcomes through great people.
Yes.
And what are great leaders? All the great leaders we know of, all the ones you can name off the ones that we always see, the Virgin Airlines. Oh God, I forgot his name. That's great, isn't it? You spoke about Simon Sinek. He talks about people being the focus. Organisations are nothing without their people. So as a great leader, you need to make sure that they are front and centre of your mind.
Mm.
And getting back to COVID, that's exactly what we need now, because there is so much uncertainty in the world. And when you talk to people about it out in the street, and when you go shopping or whatever, they still don't know what's actually going to happen in the future.
Yes.
I talk about Eckhart Tolle in his book, and he talks about how we are constantly stuck worrying about what's coming up, like what's going to happen in the future. What are we going to, if we do this, what's going to happen? And he talks about the focus of being in the now. And then there's this massive gap that we create in ourselves, and they call it the anxiety gap. And I think that's what's occurring at the moment with the COVID situation. We're in the middle of it. We're maybe coming out the other side, but we're really concerned about the future, and that's what we're worried about, not so much now. And there's that huge anxiety gap that people need to fill. And for me, it's about, guys, as a leader, fill that gap with compassion. Fill it as much compassion as you can, because that's going to help people get into the now and not be too worried about the future, because with a great leader, generally the future is good. And that's what they create in the mind of their teams or the individuals amongst those teams. So, yeah, I think care, compassion, empathy. Well, when I talk about that, I talk about empathy when we talk about every leader has empathy. They lead with their mind. We've spoken about that. But the thing that's lacking is that compassionate side, and that's when they take action. That's when the leader takes action on what's required for their team to get where they want to go and keep them emotionally stable, ready to tackle whatever it is in front of them. And, my goal for my own leadership perspective was, I always like to think of the Pied Piper who played the right tune, and he had rats and mice and that coming from all over the place following him because he played the right tune. Oh, there goes, can you hear those sirens in the background? They're not coming to get me. That's not my tune, by the way, either. And that's, for me, that's a really simple metaphor, but so important now as we approach a whole new leadership landscape. It's going to be a lot different, and people are going to expect their leaders, or expect of them, a little bit differently to what they did before, because of
I think people are going to be looking more for not just directives, but support, encouragement, acknowledgement. I watched a TED talk the other day, and I think the lady's name was Wendy Hill, and she talked about working with Pixar, the film studio, and she said she worked with them for a time, and she said they typically, for creating a cartoon feature movie, cartoon full-length feature movie, they might have 250 people contributing towards the making of that, and could take anything up to 5 years. And all of them have freedom to give voice to what comes up as they're working. So someone's working on a piece and they think, oh, that'd be really good there. And so immediately they can be in a really fluid space to say to whoever they need to say to, what do you think? And so there's this plan, but it has so much fluidity. And
what a beautiful space to be a part of as well.
Absolutely. And not every idea is taken up, of course. However, it fosters, you can almost see the threads in the creative mind going outwards. I've been, this last week or so, drawing different mandalas, and it's just a meditative process for me, and it's fairly new. And so as you're creating it, it's like you're creating on the page symbols and patterns. You're bringing together colour in a way that's foreign, because you're looking to craft an end thing. And I'm really appreciating even this is helping me think about how I'm going to bring my wisdom forward in a slightly different way. It's not directly related, but it's helping with that opening up the mind to more possibility. So being able to look,
creativity for sure.
Yeah, being able to look at what can we do here, and it doesn't have to be art, of course, but creating that space where, excuse me, ad agencies have been doing it for years. No idea is a bad idea when the team come together to, create an ad. And all the ideas get spilled on the table. Not all of them get used. But in that amassing of information and that huge co-creative space, something brilliant happens. So, and that's not how it's been for a lot of businesses before. It's been more direct,
definitely.
And more of a downward focus. So, even in the platform.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if you looked at the organisations or the teams or the leaders who are the most successful, you could almost walk into that sort of environment, I reckon, if you went and actually saw how they operated. You'd see a leader who was, and if you went into that room, I doubt if you distinguish who was in charge. They wouldn't stand out like in a lot of organisations where you go and meet. There's always that person that sort of stands out, and they're treated a little bit differently to everybody else. And maybe they've got an office, maybe they haven't, maybe they work in an open plan, whatever. But in that sort of creative culture where everybody's in it together and they're just coming up with ideas that may be left field, like you said, but that then creates even more thinking, lateral thinking, whatever it is. And then, that's when you can create some amazing ideas together as a group. And that's definitely there's not enough of that in most businesses and in most corporations. You normally get to a position of power and you become the director. I had an experience of a leader in the healthcare space a couple of years ago, and he was the new general manager of a company that I was working for, and he came up to the office to meet us all. There's probably about 40 of us, and we gathered in a small training room, And he came up and walked into the room, and he introduced himself and said who he was. Thanks for letting me be a part of your team. You know, just a little bit of quick small talk. And then that was it. And then he sat down, and then he asked us all to introduce ourselves and tell me what's great about the organisation and what things do you think we could improve. And he never spoke again. And I think it would have been, you know, to 40 people, it's probably about nearly an hour. And the atmosphere in that room prior to him being there to when he opened his mouth and said those words to the end were completely shifted. And then he spoke, and he just shared some information about who he is, what he's done, stuff like that. But by that point, he'd already engaged, and he'd won 40 fans who wanted then to know about him, who he was. So there's that. And I remember that so clearly. And I thought that is such a great technique to introduce yourself when you're in a position of power.
Yes.
Because you think of people in positions of power, they have this weird, I'll put them on a pedestal sort of scenario, a bit like we do with celebrities, I guess, and therefore treat them a little bit differently, feel a bit different around them, all those things that happen within the human physiology when you meet someone in a position of power. But he broke that down so well, so seamlessly, and created, and every single one of those people in that room speak about that moment every time we run into each other. It always comes up.
Yes.
So what a way to introduce yourself. So
yes, I've worked in New Zealand. I lived and worked for 20 years, and in my time there, I saw two leaders in particular who really impressed me, and neither of them had an office, and they managed by walking around. And they knew their staff, and they knew them so well that they could be asking, oh, you know, did you pick up the new car Friday or Saturday? And is your little girl home from hospital? You know, all of those little infiltrations into someone's personal life. Both of them could have those little conversations with all of the people. And in a big organisation, that's like, whoa, yeah. That's a big ask. And it can only happen when you're present. And, you know, you remember just the little things, and you don't have to remember everything about everybody, but enough that you are recalling a conversation, something from the past, bringing it forward and making an acknowledgement. And then another thing I wanted to share with you was I recently did a course of study, or went to an immersion actually, and one of the exercises was to, on completion, to go home and ask 3 people that we know 5 questions, and I didn't write them all down, which was feeding back to you what they thought of you, you know, where you made an impact in their lives. I can't think of the others. However, so I've fulfilled on that exercise. A couple of people have replied already, and as those responses came back in, I thought, oh, what if we got all the staff to do that amongst themselves in an organisation? Ask 2 or 3 others, you know, how have I impacted you? What influence have I made? What benefits did you gain? And to receive that feedback and acknowledgement is just extraordinary.
Yeah,
and
great.
It doesn't have to come from the top then all the time. You've really got this appreciative inquiry happening right across the playing field. And it doesn't have to be directed from the top.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's such a simple exercise, but the benefit that's reaped from that, from a psychological viewpoint,
yeah.
You know, the statistics are incredible. It's like 80% of people don't like going to work, which just astounds me. And that's one of the things that drives me to want to push compassion in the workplace, because I think that's got a lot to do with the reasons why there's that many people who don't like work. And that little exercise you just spoke about then just goes a long way to changing the perceptions of the people in the workplace, because they could think that person who thinks they work hard, they get the job done, we really love having you in the office, could think the complete opposite to that.
Yes.
Our minds are weird and wonderful. You know, we delete, we distort, we generalize stuff all the time. And that exercise is amazing. And when you spoke about the leader who spoke to all his staff and just spent that little bit of time with them, when I use a similar approach with my workshops and when I do my coaching, is I call those the 1%ers. I'm a mad sport person, and when I used to play competitive rugby league, I had a great coach, and he used to say, I don't care how good you are, if you can complete all the 1%ers on this board that I've got on here each time you play, our team one will never get beat. We'll be an amazing team, not an amazing individual team of individuals. We'll be an amazing team. And I got that from him, and that's what I call the 1%ers. It's just the smallest thing that you go up and talk to a staff member about could completely shift their thinking. They could be thinking they're going to quit their job. I hate it here. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you have that 5-minute conversation with them that completely changes that. And that is how powerful it is. It's just
the other thing that I was going to talk to you about was, you know, I mean, we've talked a little bit about it in not giving it that language, but building confidence for people and taking, for leaders, for many leaders, they've got strategy and process, and they'll be looking at maintenance and recovery kind of activity, sustainability moving forward. And now they're being compelled to trust a little deeper in a place where they haven't really practiced much, and get some confidence in sharing vulnerably. So, you know, probably one of the greatest things a leader can be saying now is, you know, I too am not certain of exactly where. However, these are the parameters, and, you know, having that little vulnerability opens up the possibility for incredible conversation, for people to be thinking, oh, he or she is just like me.
Yeah.
You know, that.
And I think that's where the power comes from. And I think a lot of leaders don't do that enough. And that is getting in shoulder to shoulder with your team and being vulnerable, like having the courage to say, yeah, I don't know, really, I probably know as much as you right now, but as a group, we're going to talk about it and share whatever ideas we have, and we're going to come up with an amazing solution together. And a lot of leaders aren't willing to do that because it's a sign of whether they think it's a weakness, an insecurity thing. You know, it could be anything.
We've been conditioned, and we came through more of a manager's model than a leader's model. Excuse me, I think. You know I managed a hospital years ago, and I was only 30 when I took it on. And most of the staff were 45 and over and had been there 10 years, most of them on the same shift, on the same floor. And I came in a fresh face out of university, and I'm going to change the world. And I came across many of them doing really unsafe practices. And it was like, well, you can't do that, you know. And so it created awful rifts in that first 12 months. The first, for me personally, was so difficult. I would go home kind of going, oh, I don't know if I can cope with this. However, you know, I didn't just discipline and say, that's a very unsafe practice, that's why you can't do it. I started an ongoing education program, and it was probably one of the first in certainly New South Wales. This was in aged care with a 79-bed rest home. And as I started to do those things, people became more and more appreciative. And then I also, staff kept saying to me, oh, you don't know how hard my job is. And after a while, I'd heard that a few times and I thought, well, maybe I don't, but I could find out. So I made it my mission over a 3-month period to do everybody's job. And it was probably the best thing I could have ever done. I never did get good at that industrial polisher. But the patients thought it was delightful. There's matron, you know, doing all these different roles. But it gave all of us a new regard for each other. And in aged care, as you probably know, people are not recompensed very well for their services. So, you know, and it's a hard job. So there's got to be a high level of satisfaction coming somewhere. And one of the reasons that prompted me to share that is 6 of my old staff found me recently on Facebook. So that's after, gosh, 30 years, 25, 30 years. And I'm like, oh my goodness, isn't that incredible? So they want to have a reunion at some point. So there we are, see, longevity and, you know, what was created. One year we fundraised and made 35,000 and bought a bus with a lift. And that's a remarkable achievement for people in those kind of facilities to be able to say, I contributed to that. You know, I was part of that.
Yeah. That is such a good point. And an underutilized strategy is exactly what you've spoken about, was you being the strategy and doing what was required. It's almost to give them an understanding, well, okay, I'll find out what it's like to do your role, and then we'll talk about it, we'll work together, so we're in this together. But, you know, the modern day, they would go to their IT department and come up with an algorithm to make that happen. And what's missing in the middle of that? The people, the person, the personalities, the behaviours, all that stuff is completely, you know, pushed aside to, I've got a great algorithm, put that in the system, we can get more efficient and be more productive because of blah, blah, blah. And it's completely taking out the most important person in the picture is the person, the people. You know, that stuff. Well, I know there is definitely room in what we do for IT and algorithms and those sorts of things. I don't disagree with that. But it's got to be complementary. It can't be the sole thing at the end of the day. Exactly. And what you did with that in that scenario, if you spoke to a leader or a manager at the moment, that would be in the too hard basket. There's got to be an easier way. And that instead of thinking, okay, what's my long-term goal? My long-term goal, right? That's what you were thinking the whole time. This is my end goal, but this is what I need to do to get that. And a lot of leaders or managers don't think like that. And that's coming back, intuition, gut, all those things. As I could guarantee, if they're good leaders and they're in that position because of their skills, their knowledge, and they've developed to get to that point, they'd be thinking exactly like you there, go, wonder if their job is as hard as they say. Maybe I should dig into that and find out a bit more. Oh, hang on, no, that's not my job. Let's go to IT and go to the department heads and see if we can come up with a better plan to try and help them. And then you're taken out of the picture when you are the picture and you can make the biggest difference.
Yes.
So use your intuition. Go with what you feel. And, you know, if it doesn't work, you know, what's the worst possible outcome if it doesn't work? Yeah. There is no worst possible outcome. But I'll tell you, if you come up with an algorithm that costs a company $10 million and that doesn't work, well, hey, you're in the same position, aren't you? So that's where I love that it's still that personable approach that people want. People need that. And as we approach this new weird and wacky and wonderful environment we're going to be working, leading, living in, it's so coming back to the person now to be involved, being a part of the decision making, being part of the implementation. All those things need to happen. And
Yeah.
in complementary to the technology we have available to us.
Yeah. Yeah. In that same environment, we would sometimes have people come back from the public hospital with a golden staph infection. So as you know, that's very resistant to antibiotics. So I decided to do a study and talk to 4 of the local GPs and local pathology. And we did this study over a 3-month period, got rid of all the Dettol, all the disinfectants, taught all of the staff, every staff went through this training process about cleaning, just good hot soap and water, yeah, but cleaning properly. And then we did swabs in various spots repeatedly over the next 3 months. And in that 3 months time, we got rid of it. And I was there for 6 years and it never returned. And we had people, coming and going. So, and what was that, about, and when I think back on that, I stayed on the page and I was consistent in that really tough first year, even though I could have given up and surrendered. And in the doing so, it's like, in the beginning, it was like, oh, what's she doing now? A bit disdainfully, right? And then it was like, oh, well, what's she doing now? And then they become part of that, what's she doing now? We're doing it now. And we had a paper published around that. And, everyone's part of that, because everyone was contributing. So, and we also became, we took students from Wollongong University gerontology program. They came for work experience and we were the first facility to do that. So, to get some firsts on the board, do things that people think, oh, we can't do that, we've tried that before, and demonstrate. So for me, I think one of the big things is to be your word, right? Do what you say you're going to do, and don't waver on that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to forge. When people see you're going to consistently show up and you're working for good, then that's very enrolling and engaging, I think.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It makes a huge difference when you are, you are true to your word and you focus on that and you stay on track. Like, you knew that it was going to be tough, but you knew what the outcome was going to be. That in itself is a leadership skill to have. You knew what you wanted and you knew how to get there, and you knew it was going to be tough, and you knew there was going to be some speed humps along the way, and maybe the occasional war, but there was nothing you didn't think you would ever get through. And that's a great sign of, obviously a great leadership as well. And there just isn't enough of that. People just won't back themselves. They just seem to go, okay, no, this is the structure. This is what they want of me. My boss above me, my direct report, they want me this. This is my job description. Like, it's not a goalpost. It's not, you don't kick it through the goalposts every time to make it work. Sometimes you miss and it still works. So there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of industries and organisations that still have that mindset.
Yeah.
That you can't go off the path that the map says. This is the map. If you fall off the side of the map, there is no bottom. There's no coming back from that. So it's almost a lot of fear-based direction, I guess.
Yeah. I encourage a lot of my clients at all levels to bring an element of themselves and marry it to the job description. What is it? On Seligman's Authentic Happiness website, you can do a VIA signature strengths questionnaire, and I get people to do that and then elicit their top 5. You end up with 30, but top 5, and then marry those to your job description. And even if you're not in the job of your dreams, you can still, by merit of what it is that you bring, it's that bit that you bring, that brings you more joy and allows you to bring some joy to others.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, that and those little things over time are what helps people to, you know, shift perceptions, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think a lot of people almost put their natural instincts and behaviours in a box, and it's never opened. Now, this is what they want me to do. This is the way I've got to do it. This is the blueprint. My little skills and behaviours and instinctively, all this stuff's in a box, and I can't open that. And if I do, oh, who knows what's going to happen? Except when you do open it, good things happen, because that's when you can change. That's when you can make a difference. That's when people start to notice. That's when things start to change. And without that, it's going to be an awfully boring, vanilla direction that we face, rather than the Neapolitan ice cream with the hundreds and thousands scattered all over the top. And that's a world I want to see. I don't want to see a controlled, contrived, vanilla world that, isn't a nice place to be. And like I said before, when we want to go to work, we want to be happy. We want to enjoy ourselves. Life's too short to go to a workplace and having it not be to your liking. And I had a question the other day about this, and basically the answer I gave this person probably wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was what they got. And I asked them the question about, did they have the knowledge, the skills, the know-how to do their job well, and did they feel like they made a difference? And they said yes. And I said, what about where you're working at the moment? And they said, no, my boss is this, my boss is that. I don't feel like I can contribute. And my first question was, well, why are you still there? If you're not feeling valued, you're not, and that sort of stuff. Have you shared that information with your direct report? No, because I don't want to, because they're, you know what? And then I said, well, what you need to do, you need to work for a company and be in an environment where your skills and knowledge and what you bring makes a difference, and they want that from you. And they nurture that, they encourage that. And unfortunately, in the environment that we work and live in, you have to find that or make it happen. One or the other. Easier to find it initially. If you're in a different position, maybe you can then change things. But I said you need to find what I call your sweet spot, because when you do find that, you'll think to yourself, I wish I had been here my whole life, because it'll just match you. It'll feel like no matter what you do, you can't do anything wrong. It's like, this is just amazing. And there are places to work out there that are like that.
Yeah.
And if you want to work in an environment like that, you've got to find it. So, yeah, I just said, find your sweet spot. Just keep going until you do.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the answer that they wanted. They were making it more about the person that they felt was rude to them or bullying them, that sort of stuff. And that wasn't the issue. You got to bring it back to you. Always bring it back, because you're the only one that can make a change or make a difference. Not rely on them or, think that they need to change, because that's not the way you need to look at it. You need to go, okay, what's best for me?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to make it work for myself? And hopefully they've got some lateral thinking from it. And hopefully I'll hear from them again one day when they say, hey, Les, I've hit my sweet spot. And I'll just say, congratulations, that's awesome. So,
yeah. And, I think as we come to a close here, it's more, we've all been really good at doing, right? We've been doing for many, many years. And I'm sure you, like me, have had long lists of, what I want to achieve today, this week, next year, 5 years. But the question now is, who are you being? Still have the list, but who are you being? And that shifts everything. And I think the biggest thing that gets shifted is the degree to which you can stand in your integrity. Because when you start looking at who I'm being, it's like, right, maybe I'm not being my best self.
Yeah, exactly.
And when everyone it has the preparedness and willingness to do that, then everything shifts.
Exactly. And once they realise that, they've only got to have that one moment when it makes a difference, and almost like the penny drops, you know, or the bells go off and you go, oh, that's what it's all about. I get it now. And have that whether it's an epiphany, a cathartic moment, whatever it is in your life, but when it hits you, you start to realise it's about who you're being, for sure.
Yeah. So as we come to a close, is there one little piece of information or suggestion that you'd like to make for leaders moving forward? A gem to leave them with?
Yeah, I guess for me, being a leader, no matter what it is your role, whether you're a manager, you're a leader. Whether you're a leader, you're a man. Like they're very, you know, they bounce around like protons and neutrons. You know, they're always working together and occasionally colliding. But with a leader, you got to remember your team, your individuals that make up that team. They don't care how qualified you are or how much you know until they know how much you care. Yeah. And that is so, you know, if you can get that into your subconscious to always think that when you approach any situation with your team or individuals within that team, it'll really help you come at it from an angle that is more compassionate, is more empathetic, you know, more understanding before you go in with all your directives. Go in there thinking about, do I care about what I do, and do they see that from me?
Yeah. Thank
you,
so
Pat.
much, Les. This has been really good. I think people need to hear perspectives from an array of people. You know, different people have different thoughts, different methods, different philosophies, and that informs us. And every time we hear something new and fresh, it's like, oh, I really like that idea, or I'd forgotten about that. And we can bring it forward again.
Exactly.
Yeah, so thank you, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Pat. Take care.
Yeah.
Take a break.
Thanks for taking a break with Pat Armistead.
Take a break.
Join us next time for more.
Take a break.
And be sure to like, share and subscribe for updates. And don't forget to click the bell for notifications. Bye for now.